This happened when I was 5 or 6, but I remember it with a clarity that makes me uncomfortable. In the early 1990s, my family moved from the UK to Hungary for my father's job. Budapest was changing fast back then. New money, new companies, foreign businesses moving in. My father was part of that wave. We bought a large house, almost a small mansion, 4 bedrooms, huge front yard, even bigger backyard. It was strangely cheap for its size, but my parents assumed it was because the country had just shifted out of communism and property values were unstable. Looking back, that was the first thing that should have bothered us. I shared an upstairs room with my sister. Our beds were on opposite sides. At night, we'd whisper until one of us drifted off. One evening, we were exhausted from playing outside all day. We fell asleep immediately. Sometime deep in the night, I woke up thirsty. The room was pitch black except for faint streetlight filtering through the curtains. That's when I saw her. My sister was sitting upright in her bed. I couldn't see details, just her silhouette, still, stiff. Before I could speak, she suddenly dropped backward onto the mattress. Not laid down, dropped, hard. The bed frame squeaked loudly. I remember thinking, that's weird. Then she shot upright again and slammed down, again and again. The mattress springs groaned each time. The entire bed shook. The rhythm wasn't natural. It was mechanical, violent, like something forcing her body up and down. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just lay there staring at her shadow doing this over and over. It felt like hours. Then it stopped. She sat upright one last time, completely still. Then, slowly, her head turned toward me. Even in the dark, I could feel that she was looking directly at my face. I shut my eyes so tight it hurt. I tried to convince myself I was dreaming. After what felt like forever, I forced myself to look again. She was still sitting there, but something was wrong. The silhouette seemed darker than the room itself, like her face was a cutout of blackness. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I would suffocate. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't let me. I don't know where the courage came from, but I jumped out of bed and ran toward her. In the second it took me to reach her bed, she was lying flat, peaceful, asleep, no movement, no tension. I shook her awake, crying, telling her what I'd seen. She laughed and told me to stop being stupid. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. And after that night, the house felt different. The hallway seemed longer, the air heavier. I started begging my parents to move. They blamed horror movies and imagination. Eventually, life returned to normal, until the morning my mother screamed. I woke up disoriented. I was hanging upside down over the second-floor staircase railing, my legs hooked over the wood, my head dangling above open air. If my father hadn't grabbed me when he did, I would have fallen 2 stories onto marble flooring. The doctor called it somnambulism, sleepwalking, but it didn't stop. I kept waking up upside down, from railings, from the side of my bed, once from the edge of a bookshelf. My parents grew frightened. A priest was called. He spent nearly an hour alone in our bedroom. When he came out, his face had changed. He wasn't calm. He wasn't dismissive. He was pale. He walked downstairs and stopped directly beneath our room. He stared up at the ceiling for a long time. Then he called my parents over quietly. That same day, we left and stayed in a hotel. The next morning, workers tore open the ceiling beneath our bedroom. Inside was a small hidden compartment. In it, they found a cloth bag of animal bones, and, hanging from a thread, a tiny doll made of those bones, upside down, exactly where my head would have been when I slept. We moved out immediately. My sleepwalking stopped the day we left that house. I don't go to church anymore. I'm not an atheist, but religious spaces make me uneasy, because when the priest looked at that ceiling, I saw something in his expression. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't doubt. It was recognition. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, for For a split second, I still feel like something is sitting upright across the room, waiting for me to open my eyes. I was stationed in England for about 3 years. I worked night shifts inside a secure facility on base, the kind of place people imagine when they hear the words restricted access. The building sat inside a fenced compound, which was inside a fenced base, and then inside a guarded perimeter. You couldn't wander into this place by accident. To get inside, you needed the right badge, multiple checkpoints and escorts. Every door logged entries. Every hallway had cameras. During the day, the place was loud and busy. Military personnel, contractors, civilians, people moving constantly. But at night, it emptied out completely. Usually, only 2 to 4 of us remained in a building big enough to hold hundreds. We monitored live camera feeds across the compound. Rows of screens rotated through different locations, corridors, storage rooms, entryways, mechanical spaces. Every 10 seconds, the monitors switched to the next camera and looped again. Outside, security patrols drove the perimeter, but we never spoke to them unless something went wrong. One night, just after midnight, 3 of us were on duty when the entry control point called. Motion alarms were tripping in one of the interior equipment rooms. That meant someone had to physically check it. My supervisor sent me. The building was quiet in that heavy late-night way, the hum of ventilation and nothing else. My footsteps echoed down the hallway as I badged through 2 secured doors and reached the equipment room. I opened the door. Nothing. The room was exactly how we left it. Racks of equipment, wiring, sealed cabinets, no open panels, no movement. I called my supervisor on the wall phone and told him the room was clear. Then I called the entry control point and asked if they could see me on camera. There was a pause. Then the guard said, "We have 2 of you." I remember staring up at the camera mounted in the corner. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Where do you see the other one?" "About your 5 o'clock. My back. I slowly turned around. There was nothing there. "Describe him," I asked. "About your height, in BDUs, muscular build, standing still." BDUs hadn't been our uniform in years. I raised my hand and pointed at empty air. "Right here." "Yeah," the guard said, "right there." I was alone in the room. I called my supervisor and told him to pull up the camera feed. He was silent for about 3 seconds. Then he said, very quietly, "Who the hell is standing behind you?" I hung up the phone and left the room immediately, closing the blast door behind me. When I got back to the operations floor, security forces were already there. My supervisor had called them. 3 armed personnel went with me back to the equipment room. I had nothing but a multi-tool on my belt and stayed behind them. We opened the blast door and they cleared the room. Empty. While they searched, the equipment room phone rang. I answered. The entry control point sounded different now. Motion alarms are triggering all over the facility. Not one area, multiple. Hallways, storage rooms, mechanical spaces, locations sealed for the night. Security forces spent over an hour sweeping the entire building. They found no one. No open doors, no forced entry, no animals. The camera system didn't record video at the time, but the motion detection system did log activity. Over 30 sensors had activated, including the low sensitivity ones that only triggered for large moving objects. Something moved through the building. We still had 4 hours left in our shift. We didn't talk much. None of us wanted to walk the hallways alone again. When morning finally came, we stayed even longer to debrief the commander. Officially, nothing was ever identified, but the part that still bothers me came up later. Those cameras were high resolution. You could identify a person's face from 40 feet away. They saw my face perfectly, but they couldn't see his. Whatever stood behind me, the camera could detect it,
The motion sensors could detect it. Multiple people saw it, but the system designed to recognize a human face couldn't recognize one there.
This happened in the early 2010s at a farm where my friend Jane and I boarded our horses on the mid-Atlantic coast. The area was old farmland, surrounded by woods and marshland, and locals often mentioned the land had been settled long before any modern houses were built there. I didn't think much of that at the time. One winter night, I arrived early before Jane. It was already dark and bitterly cold. The barn was long and narrow with a central aisle and horse stalls on each side. When I pulled in, there were no other vehicles and no lights except the single floodlight outside and a weak yellow bulb inside the tack room. I began getting our equipment ready, saddles, bridles, grooming kits, moving back and forth between the tack room and the aisle. On one trip out, I noticed something immediately wrong. One of the large barn doors at the breezeway was open. It had been shut and latched when I arrived. I remembered clearly because that door was warped and heavy. It never moved quietly. Opening it required force, and it made a loud scraping noise against the frame every single time. I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no door, no vehicle. I stepped outside and called out, asking if someone was there. Nothing answered. What I remember most wasn't silence, it was the absence of sound. Even the usual night noises were gone. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic. It felt like standing inside a sealed room. I shut the door and forced the latch into place. Trying to calm myself, I watched the horses. They were all relaxed, eating hay, shifting their weight normally. Animals notice things long before humans do, so I took comfort in that and told myself I was overreacting. Still, something felt wrong. I texted Jane and told her I'd wait for her outside under the floodlight. I didn't want to be alone in the barn. When she arrived, she had her small Jack Russell, Vinny, in a carrier. He barked non-stop as we walked toward the barn, but once inside the tack room, he settled down. We were talking about the door when we both noticed movement at the same time. Behind us, mounted on the wall, Jane had her horse bits hanging on nails, metal pieces of the bridle used in the horse's mouth. They hung freely and normally never moved unless physically touched. One of them lifted, not swung, lifted. One end rose slowly into the air as if someone had picked it up. It stayed there for a moment, suspended, and then dropped, striking the wooden wall with a sharp metallic sound. We both froze. After it stopped bouncing, it lifted again. Pause. Drop. The sound echoed in the small room. It happened again and again, always one end rising first, holding for a second, then falling. Nothing else in the room moved. No drafts, no footsteps. The air was completely still. Vinny exploded into barking, growling, and pulling toward the wall. I felt physically sick, terrified, amazed, and unable to move. My hands were shaking so badly I thought I might faint. Jane looked at my face, then calmly turned toward the corner of the room. In a normal voice, she said, "You're scaring her. Can you please stop?" The bit dropped one final time and didn't move again. The barn was silent. We stood there for a long time, waiting. Nothing else happened. We ended up riding bareback that night. Neither of us wanted to put tack on the horses or stay inside longer than necessary. We left earlier than planned. It never happened again, but what has always stayed with me is this. The object didn't fall, swing, or shake randomly. It was lifted with intention, deliberate, repeated, controlled, and it stopped only after Jane spoke to it. I don't know what was in that barn. I just know we weren't alone when we were standing in that tack room. And sometimes I wonder if whatever was there wasn't attached to the place, but to her.